Hello everyone and welcome to another Genshin lore video. Today, I'll be going over some lore relating to a character named Rene and his discoveries around the time of the Cataclysm. I'll be going over the lore presented in the Nymph stream artifact set, as well as Rene's investigation notes. Also, if you like this video, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot and I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, let's move right on and get into the video. Rene was a researcher from Fontaine who lived 500 years ago during the Cataclysm. He studied at Fontaine's Khaenri'ah Institute, alongside other characters such as Jacob and Elaine. Also, this Elaine is likely Elaine Guillotine, founder of the Fontaine Research Institute of Kinetic Energy Engineering, who was mentioned in the recent Vibrocrystal verification event from 3.5. Anyways, during the Cataclysm, Rene and Jacob traveled to the Girdle of the Sands area in northwest Sumeru. They also traveled alongside a man they called Mr. Carl, who was likely from the Khaenri'ah Institute as well. From Rene's investigation notes, we get some information on what their expedition entailed. The notes start off by talking about the Vorukasha Oasis and the sacred lotus that resided within. In their investigations of the lotus, they discovered that the lotus shared many properties with Rene and Jacob's bodies, but not Mr. Carl's. Rene wanted to take more samples for testing in the future, but the Order of the Skeptics would not let him. Later on in the notes, Rene would write about keeping secrets from Mr. Carl, and how he and Jacob had to keep up the ruse. They hid much of the information that they uncovered, and even created a fake journal to deceive him. They were trying to avoid suspicion from him, and you may be wondering why. Well, the notes talk extensively about Khaenri'ah technology and mysterious powers, even having a few pictures that we see during the Khaenri'ah of Good and Evil World Quest series. Early on, Rene compares the power of the Khaenri'ah present in the Girdle of the Sands to a censored word. Based on what Rene goes on to say in his notes, this censored power is likely abyssal power. It would tie in with later entries in the notes and would also explain why they were keeping secrets from Mr. Carl. Rene also talks about how he doesn't think power can be classified as right or wrong, saying that adults are too pedantic. Further support for this being abyssal power comes when Rene says an attitude of resistance to this kind of power is normal. He also says that he must preserve Jacob's life, which may have been the reason they used the power. The notes also say that both Rene and Jacob passed out a few times, likely from exposure to or the use of abyssal power. Rene also mentions that he forgot to eat one day, usually only having bread and jam when he did eat. At one point, Mr. Carl forged some nuts for Jacob to supplement his nutritional intake, but Rene writes in the notes that this was not necessary, but they had to keep up the ruse. Now, the notes also mention a material called azocite, which is what Khaenri'ah used to power their technology. Rene was actually kind of disappointed in azocite, as he says it may be made of pure elemental energy, but it lacks will. This need for will may have inspired Rene to use abyssal power, as that has will. Towards the end of the notes, Rene and Jacob run some tests about the Cataclysm, and all results end with destruction. Wanting to prevent a larger catastrophe and resist the impact of the Cataclysm, Rene comes up with the idea of extracting the will from the abyssal power using a refinement method. With this plan in mind, Rene and Jacob decided to return to Fontaine, with no mention of Mr. Carl at the end. Rene writes in his notes that the plan should work fine, and that he and Jacob, along with Elaine, will be successful. They then start on their return to Fontaine to tell Elaine of the plan. Now, back in Fontaine is the Khaenri'ah Institute that I mentioned earlier. This institute was run by the director and the vice director, who were mentioned in both Nymph stream and Rene's investigation notes. Odyssean Flower also mentions the director's sisters, who may have been the Nymphs. These characters are quite mysterious, with neither source providing much information on their backstories. Starting with the director, Rene mentions her in his notes while talking about azocite. He compares the pure elemental energy of azocite to its lack of will, then goes on to say it would be like comparing the director to a hydro slime. This would suggest that the director has a high level of hydro elemental energy, meaning that she may have been the Hydro Archon. It was also said that she died during the Cataclysm, so it is possible. The Vice Director is another candidate though, as she actually died as well during the Cataclysm. It's possible that they could have had something similar to a Raiden Makoto and Raiden A situation, with both being very powerful, but only one really being the Archon. Finally though, we have the director's sisters. They are only mentioned once, that being an Odyssean flower, but I have one thing I want to say about them. The sisters may have been the same as the beautiful maidens of the court of Fontaine, who admired the Sojourner, mentioned in the lore of the Stringless. That doesn't really add much to this lore, but I just wanted to throw out the idea that they may have been the same. If you want to know more about the Sojourner though, I made a video on the lore of the Wanderer's Troupe not too long ago. Anyways, let's get back to the story of Rene. In Wicked Mage's Plumule, the Vice Director talks to two characters whose names are censored out. From the context of the rest of the artifact lore, these characters are likely Elaine and Rene. They were also said to play the parts of the Knight or Hero and the Fell Dragon respectively. Elaine was likely also the tiny champion who possessed the timepiece Nymph's Constancy, though this is not exactly clear. Anyways, moving on to Fell Dragon's Monocle, this piece tells the story of what happened when Rene returned to Fontaine, albeit in a more allegorical sense. As I just said, the lore tells the story with Elaine being the hero and Rene being the Fell Dragon. It says that heroes can eventually become Fell Dragons, which is what happened when Rene used abyssal power. Upon returning to Fontaine, the hero would fight the Fell Dragon with his holy sword, ending in the death of Rene. Although the Fell Dragon had been slain, the hero Elaine would be changed by what had happened. It is said that he would never again believe in anything that the sum of human knowledge cannot completely grasp and understand, referencing abyssal power and, by extent, forbidden knowledge. It is also said that, to the end of his days, he shall conceive of a kingdom powered by machines and energies not derived from the elements. While Khaenri'ah fits this description, it may instead refer to Fontaine. Elaine did found the Fontaine Research Institute, which would provide great technological advancements to Fontaine. Fontaine is also said to have a special energy source that is running out, which could be azocite or something like it. In my most recent Fontaine speculation video, I said that Fontaine may be using technology from Khaenri'ah, which is supported by this lore. Speaking of theories though, I think it's time to talk about some. Now, as I said in the previous section, some of the lore in this artifact set is presented in a more allegorical sense, as opposed to a literal sense. Nymph's Dream uses phrases such as heroes, fell dragons, knights, and wicked mages to describe certain people and events, which is seen most extensively in Nymph's Constancy, Hero's Tea Party, and Fell Dragon's Monocle. The lore revolves around abyssal power, Khaenri'ah, and forbidden knowledge, so perhaps this allegorical style was intentional in order to prevent Irminsul tampering. Some names and words are censored out in both Rene's investigation notes and Nymph's Dream, so perhaps it was tampered with in the past. Going back to Hero's Tea Party real quick, let's consider it in an allegorical sense. The lore talks about a young girl meeting the director and vice director on a gloomy afternoon. They met in a place which saw neither the light of sun nor moon, though the people there didn't seem to care, saying the refreshments made by the vice director were delicious. The people were described as resting champions, knights, and evil dragons. The girl thought this was alright too, agreeing that the refreshments were delicious. Now, this lore may suggest that the Vice Director is actually the Hydro Archon, with the refreshments potentially being the Amrita created by her death. The resting champions, knights, and evil dragons would then be those who died in the Cataclysm, meaning the Director and Vice Director were leading this girl to the afterlife. It could also mean that they were going to the Abyss, but again, the lore is told allegorically, so the meaning isn't exactly clear. Moving on though, I think that some of this artifact's lore may be suggesting that history will repeat itself in Fontaine. Khaenri'ah was destroyed partially due to the fact that they possess technology made using knowledge from beyond Tevat. Veldragon's monocle then suggests that Elaine started using that technology in Fontaine, which puts it in danger. Odyssean Flower also discusses what happens a bit after the Cataclysm, saying that some people would seek out the path ahead using the secrets of machinery and bodies of steel. This again ties Khaenri'ah and Fontaine together. One of the people who took this path may have also been Rene, who is most likely going to appear in Fontaine. Anyways, I'd now like to discuss the names of some of these artifact pieces. Some of them really stood out to me when they were released, and for an interesting reason. So, while unlikely, I think it is possible that they could hint towards characters or groups who will be important in Fontaine's story. To start off, we have Wicked Mage's Plumule and Hero's Tea Party. Both of these instantly made me think of the Hexen Circle, especially with mages and tea parties. I have made a video where I talk about them appearing in Fontaine, so if you want to hear my thoughts, I recommend you check it out. Other than that, we have Nymph's Constancy, which made me think of Istaroth. The reason I thought of her is actually because of an achievement you can get in Unconomia. Doing a certain number of time trial challenges in Unconomia will give you the Kairos' Constancy achievement. Kairos is another name for Istaroth, so perhaps this was intentional to hint towards her involvement in Fontaine. While I haven't made a video on Istaroth in Fontaine, I have talked about Celestia's involvement in my most recent entry in the miniseries. If you want to hear me talk about her involvement though, please let me know. Anyways, that's pretty much it for the story of Nymph's Dream and the tales of Rene, the director, and everyone else. This lore was really interesting, and it's getting me even more excited for Fontaine. Currently, I have 4 videos in my Fontaine speculation miniseries, so if you want to hear my theories on Fontaine, I recommend you check them out. I've also made videos on Abyssal Power, the Wanderer's Troupe, and the God of Time herself, Istaroth. So, if you want to know more about any of those, you can check those out as well. As of this video's release, Fontaine is only about 15 weeks away, so if you have any topics about it you want me to talk about, please let me know. I would love to hear what other bits of lore you'd like me to cover in the comments below as well though. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Sources and further readings are also in the description if you want to check them out. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.